Welcome to our next CTO Roundtable session. This is a special edition of the CTO Roundtable as we co-organize this session with Holland FinTech. So thank you, Holland FinTech, for your support and organizing this. So today we have 3 CTOs, which are all members of Holland FinTech. It sounds really FinTech oriented, but the topic today is wider applicable. The topic of low-code is buzzing, I would say. So therefore, it's on many development leaders' mind. And how do you react to it? How can I benefit from low-code? And how do I not block myself from, or the company, from anything in the future? So good to see so many of you. We actually have registrations from Japan to the US today. It's I don't know how late it is in Japan, but let's see. The panel this time is fully Dutch. We have 3 CTOs. So first, Jasper Laagland, CTO of Factris. Welcome, Jasper.
Thank you.
Bastiaan de Ruiter, CTO at Blanco. Welcome, Bastiaan. And a very special guest is Remco, Jorna, CTO at FintechOS, was also part of our previous CTO Roundtable. But since Remco is a low-code specialist, we invited him again. So welcome, Remco.
Thank you.
And my name is Gerbert Oude Velthuis, CTO of Travelia and General Manager of the software house in the Netherlands. So let me stop this here so that you can see people a little bit better. Let's do some introductions first. So Jasper, can I start with you? Introduce yourself and your company a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm Jasper, the CTO of Factris. My background is in computer science. Mostly what I've done through my career is building new platforms, both in the field of healthcare or finance. Most recently with Factris and Capital for small and medium-sized businesses. What we do is we buy invoices from businesses and pay them out on the same day. That's what we do.
Okay, very good. So welcome.
Thank you.
Bastiaan, can you explain in a few sentences what Blanco does and what your role is within the company?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Bastiaan de Ruiter. I also have a background in computer science, then joined McKinsey's business technology office before moving to a bank insurance company and had various roles there. I'm now the CTO at Blanco. Blanco is a fintech, and we help independent wealth managers, mutual funds, and banks in managing clients' investments. Basically, we have 2 types of products. We have a Know Your Client suite that helps independent wealth managers to meet their regulatory requirements on that front, and we have an investment suite, and there we help them that they can manage their investments on behalf of the clients. And we currently have 125 clients, and we're growing quite rapidly. So that's basically Blanco.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And Remco, obviously, same question to you. A few sentences on FintechOS and your role, please.
Yeah, I'm Remco Jorna. So I'm the CTO of FintechOS. We are a Romanian-born company headquartered now in the UK, in London. And we actually deliver a low-code, no-code platform for financial services institutions that allow them to digitize very rapidly. And what we also see that in more and more scenarios, our technology is used to replace or augment existing systems inside banks and insurance companies.
Okay, very good. So you as a viewer, please note that you should try to get the most out of the session, of course. And we really would like to get as many as questions or remarks from your side. So just type your question in the question tab, and we will address them and ask it to the panel. When there are questions that we cannot address during the session, we will try to get back later on it to you. So, okay, let's start. So I'm sure that many of you know that there's this statement that Gartner predicted by 2024, low-code application development will be responsible for more than 65% of all application development activity. If that's going to be the case, I'm very interested to see how our CTOs of today panel are preparing for this. Do we need other types of developers or no developers at all? Or let's start with getting a common understanding of low-code first. So Remco, can I ask you to give us your definition of low-code?
Yeah, that's it's interesting because if you look at the in the industry and the analyst, everybody has their own definition, and
Correct.
depending on the company that's delivering the solution as well. But we basically define it as a set of standard practices, engineering practices, patterns that we have put in a let's say development environment that allows digital consultants, like we like to call them, or digital developers, to point and click and drag and drop applications, compose them with all these engineering practices in place, so they can focus on delivering the business value instead of focusing on the wiring and putting all the infrastructure in place.
Okay, so it simplifies the development process. It's click, drag and drop. That's what you're saying, and block-based programming. Some people call it also. Yeah. Okay, and minimal hand coding. That's why it's called low code, I guess.
It's low code, and the hand coding that you need to do, because you always need to make something specific. That's not part of the bigger blocks. Yeah. You still need to have let's say an engineering or a developer mindset to understand what you're doing. The basic principles of building software should be in the heart and mind of the people operating those systems.
We'll get more to that later for sure. So Jasper, you told me that at Factris you started off with a low-code solution. And was it when you hired, or just before you were hired, you moved away from that?
Exactly. Well, a factoring company in the Netherlands, and that at that time a company was using a no-code.
Can you speak up a little bit, Jasper?
When we started Factris, we acquired a factoring company in the Netherlands, and that company used the no-code platform at the moment. Not both the platform and the development of the platform were completely outsourced. As a fintech, we found it important. So we looked at the market, and we found that what we intended to do and the requirements that we had as Factris, being a pan-European factoring company, was not currently possible supported in the platforms or the solutions that we looked at. So at that moment, we decided to create our own software using traditional software development approach.
Okay, and you also, when we prepared, you spoke about intellectual property concerns that you had around.
Yeah, so at that, in this case, also we weren't owner of the intellectual property, so whatever was built was also considered property of the development company we were working with. So everything we built was also able to be used for our competitors at the same time, and also, that's also one of the reasons we'd like to have that, both the intelligence and also the ownership of that inside the company. So that's also one of the reasons we decided to pull it inside the company. Okay,
yeah, cool, thank you. Good reason. So Bastiaan, question for you. So you could say that API layers, extensive frameworks like React, code generators, they're also type of low-code environments. It's not drag and drop, but it's speeding up, it's block-based development, etc. You see this?
Well, in a sense, it's similar in the sense that if you look at the low-code definition of Remco, it's all is about modular design and abstractions to a higher level. And of course, it's not drag and drop, that definition. But if you look at Blanco, we are a custom code company. So we have our platforms built in Node.js for the back end, Angular in the front end. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that we do everything ourselves. We like modular design. Everything is in a microservice architecture. And for instance, you mentioned APIs. We have a lot of connections with third parties. So if we see that there is a third party, a module, how you would look at it, that is providing functionality that we need, we just incorporate it. So we have MyTech for identification. We have a party for doing all sorts of screening checks, whether people are okay and have a good history. Mm-hmm. So that's one.
View, I guess.
Exactly. So that's one part of it, and the other part also, if you use custom code, that doesn't mean they also have extensive frameworks, a lot of libraries. For Angular, for instance, we also use for UI components, we use DevExpress. So in that sense, it's also a level of abstraction higher. So yeah, definitely we use all of these to improve and make our whole process more efficient.
Yeah. Okay, makes a lot of sense. So I would say we have a nice spread of knowledge in the panel. You know, Jasper started with Lowcode, moved to custom code, so good experience there. Bastiaan is developing using all kind of layers and frameworks, and Remco works for a company that provides a low-code, no-code product. So it's an interesting mix. So I would like to start with a challenging question for you, Remco. I think I know the answer, but do you believe low-code is faster to develop and maintain and therefore cheaper? What's your reaction on that?
So basically what you do as a company using a low-code platform, you push a lot of the activities that have to do with your software composition, your frameworks, maintaining compatibility, etc. You push it to the vendor of the platform. And of course, if you look at our technology, underneath, we use these frameworks that Bastiaan was just talking about.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense to invent a new React or Angular, and what we're providing are basically micro front ends that you can include into your in your own environment, or in some scenarios where people like to be fully in control of the user interface. You can connect into our solution using APIs, and just like Bastiaan said, a lot of existing systems are, we call it pre-integrated, but it basically means that all the logistics, all the technology that is needed to plug into a Life 100 system or a GL system, that's part of the platform. You don't have to worry about it. So in that sense, I think you're faster, and we can see it in the amount of time that we spend in customer organizations for bringing the solutions to market.
Yeah, nice. So you have measures, KPIs on that, etc.
Yeah, we're constantly measuring how fast it is, and as with any platform, you see that everybody's bleeding time in integrations and fully optimizing, making the UI pixel perfect. So depending on those type of requirements, your project can take more time, even in a low-code environment.
Okay, yeah, very good. So would you say it's applicable in a majority of situations, Jasper, or would you say no? I think that still at this point in time, custom development is applicable for a majority of situations.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a middle ground, since there's quite some processes that are, let's say, straightforward and have been done over and over again, such as client onboarding, customer onboarding, things like that, KYC, and yeah. So if you build some for that others can use, I think it's very, very useful. And also, we ourselves are looking into, let's say, picking things from other parties that already work. We're not going to, for example, build our own KYC completely with you have the passport scan, etc. There's really no added value to build those things yourselves. And I think my colleagues are very good at doing these things. We also blocks in the UI, for example, that we can reuse. We use what we call atomic design, and we use React in the front end, so you can build buttons and inputs, and from those you can create forms, and those forms you can reuse on multiple pages. So not exactly low code, but it gets closer and closer, and also since it's tailored to what we do as a proposition, also we can see that if we want to build something similar to what we've done before, we can also do that faster. But I think there's a growing use case for using low code for those cases, and I think most of the time we spend is analyzing exactly what we want, how we want it, and then how do we make this into a reality, and then the next step is then the coding. So also a lot of this is research before you even start writing code. I think that's on building something is analyzing how we want it, how does it scale, how does it work in different countries, etc. So also there's the actual development part is also just part of the whole puzzle and process that we have.
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you. Anything you would like to add, Bastiaan?
Well, I agree with Jasper that it is really much dependent on the domain. For instance, in Blanco, in our investment suite, that's all about processing transactions, doing ordering, having all sorts of reconciliations, and to keep a high performance and scalability. We are all on AWS serverless, but it needs really a lot of thinking through what database to use, how to get this performance going. And you need a lot of domain expertise. Yeah. So for that part, custom code is then often the way to go, if you ask me. But I can imagine for the workflow for an onboarding, for instance, that there it's much it's likely that the future is going there. Although there are two other topics that I would like to mention. One is we notice that that a lot of our clients, for instance, the banks, they give us big requests for proposals, pen tests, and everything is really about security. And for us, it really is helpful that we now have everything in our own hands. We know exactly how our IAM works. We know exactly how our AWS environments, staging environments work, what services we use, etc. And that is something you might not have in low code. And the other one is also the number of people that you have available currently in the market. So probably it will be growing. But now, if you look at if you want to have good computer people with a computer science background, they love Node.js, Angular, React, etc. And still, the low code providers are, of course, smaller in the market. So that's maybe also something for Remco, of course, to reflect on. Yeah. So just curious about that as well.
A very valid statement that you make. So we spend a lot of time in enabling our partners and community to onboard, let's say, developers on using the low-code, no-code platform. And it's usually a different type of developer than the guys that you have running around, being experts in Angular or serverless and whatever. We do have those people, of course, in our organization, because building a platform that is simple to use requires a lot of very difficult technology to make it happen. And we have those people in our organization, and these are really the hardcore developers. They will start optimizing the ORM frameworks that are underneath. They come up with SDKs to make things easier. They look into the market, what's happening around modern data platforms, and then translating all of these trends and technologies into something that is then more abstract to our customers. And I agree with you. We also run a managed services operation. So we have a lot of insights on how the technology is operating in a real scenario. And we're using those insights, those metrics constantly to improve the way that we deal with databases for code optimization and etc. So you need a lot of very hardcore development and engineering people in the organization to build a low-code platform. But for our customers, they don't need to have those people anymore. At least
for your customers, it's more
that we're working with. And I think both Jasper and Bastiaan made a very good remark that it depends on the problem domain that you're working in, and that's why we made the decision only to work for financial services, for banks and insurance companies, because then you can really start building the accelerators, building the low-code, no-code screens and the environments instead of supporting the whole world.
So you're focusing on specific processes than a generic solution in that sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that also that domain knowledge helps in solving an issue that,
Okay.
That's insurance companies have. I think that's very, very valid. And if you were to say start using a low-code platform, sort of building everything from scratch, there's still quite some work to be done to get yourself started. So I think it's a very smart move to focus on a specific fragment of a market and go there. So,
yeah. So when you choose for low-code, then that's one of the topics to look at, of course. So what I would like to do is see, how are we using, and the audience is using low-code today. So let's do a quick poll on are you using low-code in your company today? And the poll will arrive on your screen. 3 answers, just pick the one applicable to you. And then submit. So let's see, give it a few seconds to roll in, to let the answers roll in. And then we'll get the results if the answers are there. Can we get the results? Okay. So it's interesting. Bastiaan, can you elaborate a little bit on what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting. I like that there's some flavor of low code. Yeah. So that could be that people say, we're a client of Remco, right? For parts. Or it could be the more the version of we use other type of abstractions in a modular building. So that is very interesting. But I also find 40% we are developing everything from scratch also quite interesting.
It might be the so it's I guess we're in that process what Gartner was talking about to 2024, to 65%. So we're in the process of moving into more block-based development, low-code approach, etc. But no one, where everything is low-code yet. So it's not surprising, but good to see. Good to see. Thank you. So stop sharing so that people can see you better again. That's more important than the slide. Do you believe that low-code can help us with the shortage of developers that we're experiencing? So, Bastiaan, you referred to that a little bit before. So, do you see that going forward, low-code might help with that?
Well, then it depends on the setting again. If I look at my previous job, then I was managing a department of 200 plus people. It was an operational department, a department that helped clients in financial difficulties. And there we implemented Pega systems. And that's also basically a sort of low code, because they can also drag and drop quite easily and implement processes. But there were 2 things. The positive is that it's now easier to implement new process or to change something, much easier than with the system we had before. And that is really helpful. So then you need less developers. On the other side, if I look at the implementation, then we had like 40 people working on the project at the height. And that was not for implementing the process, not for the low code part. it was all about connecting to legacy systems, doing a data migration from the large SQL SQL database to a non-SQL blob-based database, and all that kind of topics, and writing down, describing the processes, and that kind of skill sets you probably still need, and think through the data model. So I think that it definitely will help in if you have it set up, and then you can then speed up changing things, adding things. But we still need computer scientists as well, I'm afraid.
No, I'm not afraid. We all like them. So Jasper, anything to add from your side here?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and quite you need people with the same mindset and mentality as in many cases. Systems start relatively small and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's all part of a bigger ecosystem. So you need people with experience to tackle these issues, to have an oversight of the general architecture. If you want to add or change something, how does it affect? So we spend a lot of time on writing tests on various levels, and it's what I'm maybe Remco can provide some insight into how, because we're used to building unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, etc. And you want to be on top of things also in your change management, that you consistently provide a stable base for the end users. So because some developers and practices there, but I wonder where's the line in Lowcode there?
Yeah. Okay, very good. So Remco, you already alluded to it a few minutes ago. So the difference in skill set between a developer using Lowcode and a developer using custom code. How would you define it? So I want to hire one of each. You know, what are we looking for?
Yeah, we like was said before, you need people with a developer background or mindset, because when you look at low code, the things you always need to implement are specific business rules or decision matrices, or working with data, understanding data, understanding interactions with a third-party platform. Because also in low code, you can create terrible solutions that are very chatty with backend systems, and you can do maybe 20 calls to a backend system because of bad practices, a bad like iteration or loop that you build inside your low-code platform. So just having, and I think it was a myth already from 20 years ago when case tools were very popular and Oracle had their environments, etc. And we put pure business people behind the keyboard for creating those solutions. You ended up with not such great maintainable technology. So you still need people with an engineering mindset. In my opinion, it just changes the fact that they are not wiring elements together for interacting with a company like Salesforce or Dynamics or whatever, because that's been pre-built, and they can really focus on getting the data out of those systems, having the interactions, and doing the business logic on top of it, and that saves time. But you still need both people, and especially when it comes to integrations that are not out of the box, because that happens as well. Customers or clients have systems that are not always nicely exposed. Let's put it like that. You need to understand what's going on. You need to understand integration landscapes. You need to understand what a queuing mechanism is, or a service bus, how it interacts, what happens if the system is not available. So there are many things that you still need to do.
So do I hear you say you actually it's pretty comparable, the skill set that you need for custom code and for low code. The the low-code environment speeds up the process maybe, but the knowledge and capabilities you need are comparable. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you still need this to have this mindset. You're just not programming Angular or React or on Apache Camel or whatever type of solution. You do it in a more abstract way, but it's still programming.
Yeah. Okay. So would you then be working as is it safe to say that as a low-code developer you would be working more with the business directly, or is it comparable? You still need those bridge roles like a business analyst, etc. How do you see that, Bastiaan? Would you need those business analyst question. Roles less or more if we're moving more and more to the low-code environment?
Well, maybe it's similar to what you saw in data analytics, because there you used to have that data was done often in big financial service companies more centrally. In my department, I had my own small management information team, but most of them of my colleagues were not that lucky. And the good thing is that you got new tools like Tableau, which is also a new level of abstraction, but then in data analytics, that really helped to spread the knowledge. People could create their own dashboards much more easy. What you saw then is that they also made it more too democratic a little bit. So there were too many people using it. So they restricted again in my previous job. And I think with low-code, it's probably similar, right, Remco? Because I can understand what you say. For the setting up the whole system, you still need a lot of expertise. You need to be able to connect to the service buses, etc. But just the smaller changes, like I have a process, but now the process step changes. I could imagine that that's something that you don't require an IT professional anymore, but someone in the business could do it with some training. Would you also see this like this, Remco?
Yeah, that's right. So you're, especially for those type of, let's say, more functional changes or improvements to your process, you can do some very rapid prototyping. And once the basics are in place, so the infrastructure is in place, the connections are in place, you can play with it. And then you can put it back in the hands of a business user who can do the prototyping.
That's interesting because Gartner defined the so-called citizen developer. Citizen developer is an end user, not an IT employee, and he is capable of learning the low-code platform in such depth that she can create business applications. And they're usual, between brackets, amateurs in the world of coding, but experts in knowing what their department needs to be more efficient. So that's an interesting definition from Gartner here. And if I look at from a custom development point of view, citizen developers creating dashboards, data analytics, application for personal use or group use, I can see that. But what I hear you saying, Remco, is that actually it can go further. So can you allude to that, Bastiaan? What happened in your company with those business data analysts that you had? How far could they change processes, etc., or was it just data analytics?
So what you saw is that they restricted access to the most sensitive databases, GDPR, of course. So the experts in my management information experts, they had already more access. They could do more. And in the business, to be honest, it was more like having different views on the just changing the view on the data. So you saw different steps of what people could do. And if I because I like the citizen developer, but then I'm hesitating there because we used to program in assembly. I actually did it when I was younger, PowerPC assembler language. But then you move on to C. Then you get object-oriented languages. Now we get into Angular and Node.js. We have low-code, but all the same, I have the feeling that the fundamental skills set about structuring problems, about how you think through how to debug something, that still remains the core and the same. So the citizen developer, I can imagine that it's like business people changing the workflow, changing things like that. But really, citizen developer, that suddenly everybody can develop, I just don't believe it. It's like saying that suddenly everybody can become an architect because you have a better tool.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't see it.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay, indeed, and so, but you have the tools, and in principle, you could develop larger systems, workflows, processes, etc. So, what if they have the citizen developer has the access to those tools? So, what would be the risk of doing that? And do you foresee that in the future, Remco, that they would develop large systems? You know, in I don't know, 5 years from now or so.
That's a good one. I used to be a principal architect in an insurance company, and we actually went to a well-known company in Seattle to talk about citizen development. And one of the biggest fears that we had as an organization is going back to the days where mission-critical systems were built in Access and in Excel.
Yeah.
And that's something that can very easily happen if you don't put the right governance in place. So we do see people building core processes, but we also see working with banks and financial institutions that there's a lot of governance around it, because you're not building it for, as a prototype or an experiment. You're building it to run your day-to-day operations. And also the regulators, they kind of want to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
They have to be in control. You have to be in control what's in production. Like Bastiaan said, to be in control about data. So what are the curated data sources? What can you connect into? How do you deal with IAM type of solutions, multi-factor authentication type of problems for certain scenarios? So I don't see low-code, no-code platforms to be in the hands of everybody and then building those systems, because it gives too much problems in enterprise organizations for governance and managing.
Yeah. Okay. So Jasper, you're more from, I would say, a company that also uses your technology yourself in that sense. Mm-hmm. You're developing for yourself. How do you see that? Would you see more responsibility going towards the business, or do you foresee in a few years from now that it stays with the IT related departments?
Yeah, I think it will, in the parallel, having, let's say, a citizen developer and end user changing your process, you really need to make sure that they know what they're doing. So, in a limited sense, that is possible. I think that most of the work goes into making sure that we know what we're doing, what the approach is, and also we use a lot of our knowledge from our own, let's say, organization, administration, operations, because they actually know how the process works and that we need to translate into a system. So it's very we need to work very closely. Remain as you need someone to understand, let's say, the bits and the bytes and the performance and all what Bastiaan and Remco mentioned as well. You need to understand the architecture and how do you test and how is it consistent, and also sometimes you need to do a migration, and all these things are quite hard to do. So I think you can grow closer to each other and have, let's say, quicker iterations. And also code, you can experiment more if you have a new system or a new part of a system. Then Lowcode could help you very much with seeing what works best for you as well, and then building further on top of that and just customizing that as well.
Okay. So a few questions from the audience. So thanks for that, and let them come in. Let's start with a simple one. Remco, is SAP's platform a low-code solution? George asked that. How would you consider that?
I assume, I don't know SAP
Okay.
that much, but I assume they have low-code capabilities inside the platform.
But there's a lot of
delivering,
things that you can call low-code. I guess that's behind this
yeah.
question. Yeah.
They have a lot of accelerators, and you're not programming them from scratch, you're just configuring them. And configuring is also, it sounds strange, but part of low-code development.
Yeah. So another question here, and this is actually a question from two similar questions from Jeroen and Milan, and it's addressed to Bastiaan. What criteria do you use to decide to build in low-code or, for instance, Angular or something? So use something or develop something.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what we typically do is we try to really understand what companies are around us. So our most important way of doing low code, right? We're a customer code company, but that's using third parties. That's really key to us. So we try to really know a lot of companies that have capabilities that are useful to us, that already have their own platform. And then it's quite simple. If they can do it in a way that we think is really well thought through and we never do it ourselves.
Yeah.
But it has high criteria. You should pass the criteria of our developers and our architects and their customer code, of course, the developers. So it should be a solid solution. And I think that if we would like to use no code, for instance, low code also in our processes, for instance, in our onboarding, that would be exactly the same. We would just have our developers think through, what does this mean for security? What does this mean for flexibility? Do we believe that we can offer the same functionality to our clients? If the answer is yes, then I think we're quite open to an experiment.
Yeah. Interesting. So it's a little bit subjective, but it has to pass the developers test.
yeah. But it is always about the same, right? With developers, it's about, is it architecturally sound? Is it flexible? Yeah. And does it have good security? Does it have good performance and scalability? That's basically always what you check.
Indeed. Yeah. So a question to you, Remco, from Vincent. Can an example be given of a moving target in a low-code project, and how was it handled?
Oh yeah, that's the same as in any project. You start with a scope, and once people get busy, they figure out that the scope should be different. So we're just using agile practices to deal with those type of situations. So it's more a process thing than a technology element. But maybe I don't fully understand the question, so I might be answering completely in the wrong way.
Yeah, maybe, but I can also imagine that that you have war stories about a citizen developer thinking, okay, let's configure this process how I think it should be, instead of things like that.
More a problem that people, once you start doing low code, they don't always recognize the boundaries, because with low code there are some restrictions. You can only do what the platform allows you to do, and if you want to do something different, you have to build something in your infrastructure. So we had an example of a company that was using our platform, running it in our managed services environment, which is on cloud. And they wanted us to connect directly onto their MQ service bus. And then somebody actually tried to do it, which is an interesting approach. It will never work. And if you have people who don't really understand things about infrastructure, about connections, about protocols, about security, and etc., then you run into problems, and you need to rethink or go back and just build it from scratch. But just use custom coding to make very specific solutions. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So we'll do more questions later on, but because of time, I'm moving on. I'm just trying to skip some questions here. So we at the software house, we often see that clients are coming and say, "Hey, this is a simple system," and very often in the beginning it is, and Jasper also alluded to it, and but then business grows and complexity grows because of requirements, etc., and the system becomes more complex. And I think you all said it already. Good foundation, design processes, test habits, etc. This is needed. Otherwise, the system might not be maintainable in the future. So how do you prevent that from happening, Bastiaan, in your team?
Well, this is always an interesting one. How to manage the complexity. You start out with a nice clean platform, and then clients ask more functionality. We really have a platform approach, and that works quite nicely with Know Your Client. So there we try really, if we make something, we make it generic for all of our clients that they can all benefit from it, that we can keep the costs low, always in a microservice environment. We're not mixing tech stacks to keep the technological complexity low. And this is how you try to keep it manageable. And you don't want, because we have many settings, so it is a platform, but you can just choose yourself what functionality you want. But also there, it's really about restricting. And if you see that people don't use the settings, you need to reduce it and get rid of it, because it just keeps on expanding. Yeah. Now, for our other investment suite, that's really in the core of asset managers, and then you need a lot of data, a lot of settings. There it's even more difficult. So there we have fortunately, we acquired a company that has a very flexible data structure, and that is really important, because every asset manager has different types of data, different types of reporting they want to have for the clients. Everything is different. So we try to accommodate them being different, but still with the same data model at all times and the same reports, but they can just change everything in the report, what data they want to show. Basically, it's one big database table, that system. And in that way, you can also reduce it, but still there, it's really, it's a system that has been built over the years. It is an incredibly complex system. So you still need good documentation, but to be honest, you need developers that know the system inside out. Yeah. That's the most important.
Jasper, anything to add from your side there? On what good foundation design process?
Yeah, I think it's quite hard to, let's say, prevent this from happening, since systems will grow and will change and requirements will change. Also, in our business, our strategy has changed. We focus on different things. As it goes with a startup, you start somewhere and you have this road. It's not linear. Yeah. So the best thing you can do is try to prepare for this by making sure that the choices you make are sound, and that you build something that's flexible and scalable, and as always, will not you imagine it will be, and you will need to do some refactoring, some changes will be needed. But the best is to have a decent process to organize that, and to have people who can think quickly, make changes, and also think about, we need to both grow our business, but also we need to maintain our tech. So it's also always, let's say, a bit of a struggle against how fast do we want to, against how do we want to organize our architecture, and that requires a lot of debate and thinking. Yeah. And there's I think, unfortunately, there's no silver bullet here. That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges in software development. Is building something now is easy, but building something for the future is difficult. I think that goes both for let's say, custom development and low code.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. So Remco, would you say that because of these, this rich toolkit in low code, and people can drag drop, that it's easier to control the complexity, or easier to grow complexity? How do you see that?
Yeah, that's the thing is, if you can do your basic tasks in a very simple way, being properly supported by a good development environment, or as we call it a studio, we call it innovation studio. You get different conversations. So you can avoid some complexity by having those conversations. If you start reaching the boundaries of the platform, the things that you can do easily with the platform. In all scenarios, there are like exit points or hooks where you can do some programming. But people know that once you go there, you go back into engineering. So they try to avoid it and to try to stick with the common processes, the common accelerators, instead of going there. Where if you are a developer that who has to do everything from scratch, it's easier to sidetrack and start adopting all kinds of different frameworks and technologies without really considering what the impact of those technologies is on your platform. I'm pretty sure that Jasper and Bastiaan also do their software composition analysis, probably on a daily or weekly basis, to find out what type of open source platforms have been introduced in your technology. And it's easy, and developers just assume that those frameworks that you can download are secure by nature and that they are maintained and everything else, which is not always true. Yeah.
No, that's definitely not true. Yeah. And you see that a lot often with, let's say, if some relatively new technologies, that often happens. One of my first React projects, we pretty much had to rewrite half of the, let's say, the core of the applications, and it was just not at the moment everybody was using that specific setup or framework, but after, I think it was pretty much canceled because nobody supported it, and you need to move to React app or React something else.
Mm-hmm. You see the things like Angular and Angular V1 and V2 and all those things.
Angular actually at some point decided they just wanted to have a completely new version and redo everything.
No, indeed.
And so that will keep on happening.
Oh, sorry. So the software house developed in a system in the past for one of our clients that actually created a low-code development tool. So sort of we developed a low-code system there. So it was only used for internal, but it could be used for external. So looking a few years ahead, Bastiaan, do you see something for your products there? So are you thinking, hey, low-code might help our company towards our clients?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about our company is the majority of, we have a mix of clients. Mm-hmm. So we have banks, but the majority of our clients are independent wealth manager, and they are like companies of 5 to 70 people. 70 is already a very large independent wealth manager. Mm-hmm. So if I look at low code, I could definitely imagine that Blanco uses low code in our development because it goes faster, and if it's a solid foundation. I could see this. The citizen developers, our clients will never become that. Okay. I'm sure, because they are all about clients. They're all about asset management. They are not into thinking in processes, and they really do not like anything that smells like IT. They just want us to give them a good platform that works, that functions, that helps them to have more time for the clients, and then they're happy.
Makes a lot of sense.
So for our own development, I could definitely see it in the future. So I will keep an eye on Remco. For our own clients, I don't see it happening, at least for the smaller ones.
Okay, very good. Yeah. So and a related question, and we already talked about it a little bit, but think 10 years ahead. It's COVID is behind us, and 10 years ahead, do we see less custom developers or more custom developers with this low-code movement? Can I start with you, Jasper? How do you see it?
Yeah, sure. I think Bastiaan made a with a nice introduction there. You see every, let's say, few years extraction, Lowcode might be the next thing. I think there needs to be some consolidation. There's no standard or anything yet. We're just exploring the field a bit at the moment. But I definitely think there's, for example, if we were to provide business loans as well, we might very well reach out to a low-code solution because it again. But I think we'll reach a next step. Whether low-code will be it, I'm not sure, but I think something very similar, let's say higher levels of abstraction will be there, and in 10 years it's quite
far away in IT.
Quite a horizon. If you look at where we were 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
I think we're just working with Ajax was something we just could have forms that didn't reload when you posted something. So but I definitely think it will be less writing custom code and more, let's say, putting building blocks together and making sure that the total of everything works. Yeah.
Remco, and what's your opinion 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think there will be a little bit less custom coding than there is today, but there are many use cases. If you want to get to super high performance or very specific scenarios, then it's very difficult to reach that with a low-code platform, because you're always dependent on what this low-code platform provider is putting in place.
Yeah.
And we see with some companies that also provide low-code platforms that they start restricting the amount of calls you can do on their APIs, or putting some interesting license terms on top of it. So there will be scenarios when custom coding will give you a competitive advantage. But there are also many cases like KYC or onboarding, etc., that are very standard, and there's no reason to start to be very different in custom coding your KYC process.
Yeah.
It's more a matter of integrating the ecosystem.
You can imagine over time that. I'm sorry. You can imagine over time that there are more and more of these processes becoming standard.
Yeah.
And so okay. Anything to add to that, Bastiaan, more or less?
Yeah, well, I agree. Also, how Jasper explained it, going to higher level of abstractions, you see that everywhere. Also, for instance, if you look at cars, nowadays, Seat, Skoda, Volkswagen, they all have the same platform.
Yeah.
But we still have a lot of engineers. They're just doing other stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that's what's going to happen here as well.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So, okay. Time flies when you're having fun. Sharing my screen again. So before we go to the questions of the audience, I would like to talk about for 1 minute about the CTO Roundtable sessions. We are organizing these once a month. We rotate the panel. Remco is always there. No, I'm kidding, but normally we rotate the panel, and if you want to be on the panel, it's really fun and you get to know other people, etc. Just let me know if you have a topic that you would like to see on one of these panels. Just let me know. Send me an email, gerbert@tsh.io. Okay, here it is. Just to make sure it's you can remember it. Enough commercials. So let's move to the questions. I've got some questions here. So a good share of a question from Vincent. A good share of software companies create configurable libraries for their customers, just to be used in custom codes. How does low-code compete with that? I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but anyone wants to pick that one?
if you, for example, I think Remco does both. So they build a low-code system, but also they have let's say, the building blocks. And I think that's a client or a customer, if you want to find a solution for your problem. If you have something custom built, you can have that process, and maybe you can tweak it a bit, but then you have to conform to what it does. And if you move on to low code, you can have everything yourself, but you need to do some work. So that's a bit of a trade-off on whether you want to have something custom built for you, which you have to accept that you do. Another way is that you have some flexibility, but you need to do some work yourself as well. I think it's pretty much your own decision to make what you want to do there.
Okay. So I already see that it's 4 o'clock. At least here in the Netherlands, it's 4 o'clock. So we'll get back to the questions. I would like to thank you, Remco, Bastiaan, and Jasper. Your insights were very valuable, and I believe this was an interesting discussion. Cannot give you a gift now, but if you check your inbox, you will see that you just received a gift. I hope you enjoy it, and thanks again. So with this, we end the CTO Roundtable session, and hope to see you all next time. So,
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.